Then the next day, it's like a Monday. She starts tagging me in these posts on LinkedIn. Hey, Marcus Chan killed my son, blah, blah, blah. Just over and over and over. I'm like, oh my God.
That was Marcus Chan. He went from being the worst rep on his sales team, that earning a $29,000 a year salary and no commissions because he had no sales in 7 weeks, was close to getting fired, even though he had the highest activity metrics, and went from that to earning 12 promotions in 8 years, leading a $195 million a year sales organization and managing over 110 people at a Fortune 500 company. He is a Wall Street Journal best-selling author, and he is a 4-time Salesforce Top Influencer for sales, and his frameworks have generated over $950 million for his clients. Now, this conversation went way beyond sales tactics, though, and we do get into sales. But he told me a couple stories that I've never heard him share publicly, including one about a manager that he lost and the guilt that he carried as a result, and what it taught him about the cost of leadership. So if you manage people, salespeople or not, this one's going to hit different. So let's get into it. All right, welcome to the show, Marcus. Really glad to have you, brother.
To be here.
I almost wish I hit record like 10 minutes ago. Like we've been riffing on so many things, and I've got a whole list of topics that I want to get into with you. And we actually started this discussion a few minutes ago. We finally hit record. Want to dive in. What I want to start with is your sales story. Your sales story from individual contributor to a top exec, and oftentimes, like, I'd known you for a little while before I realized the scope of the team that you were running and like what you were doing as an executive and as a manager. But it didn't start that way. Like you had an interesting start to sales. Talk me through week 4 or 5 in no deals and your bottom performer and as a salesperson in your story. What's it like? Talk me through it.
Yeah, man. Well, first off, so I got into B2B sales. Didn't really know it was B2B sales, to be quite frank, because I was kind of paying the vision on basically helping build a startup division of a Fortune 500 company. So I didn't see that as like, hey, I'm in sales, right? It was also against like my parents' wishes as well, because you're kind of your prototypical, come from China and Taiwan, high expectations, they're immigrants. You're supposed to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, and I went into sales after I graduated. So there was already a couple things going against me. Now, kind of fast forward in that role, 4 or 5 weeks. I hadn't closed a single deal, and I was getting really stressed. I was stressed with my own performance, but like I saw other people on my team who I didn't think was working that hard, and they were doing better than me. Nothing, not crazy number, but they were at least closing some deals. And here I am, I'm like, man, I haven't closed a single deal. Fast forward to week 7. It was like week 7 or 8, and my boss pulls me into his office on a Friday afternoon at 4 p.m. and says, Marcus, if you don't turn this around, I'm going to have to fire you. Oh my God, I'm already doing terrible. I'm already outworking everybody. Like I'm doing way more activity, way more calls. We also did in-person cold calls. My activity metrics were out of this world, but couldn't book a meeting to save my life. Couldn't close a single deal. And that was like a really pivotal point for me, because I was blaming a lot of different reasons, sources of why I wasn't successful. I blamed the economy, because this is 2007, so the economy started getting really bad. I blame my boss for not training me. I blame the lack of onboarding. I blame the product was not great. I blame out of worse territory. I blame basically anyone, everyone. Around the same time, I was complaining to girlfriend at the time, now wife, and I was just saying how this is the worst ever, right? And she said, so what are you going to do about it? And I'm like, I guess I don't know. She's like, well, you've always learned pretty quickly. Why don't you go and you used to be a lot of books. Maybe there's some sales books or something. I'm like, oh, I guess that makes sense, right? Didn't even occur to me to try to figure out how to solve the problem. So I went to the library and I got every single sales book, and I just started voraciously reading every single sales book. There's some old school stuff and whatnot, but I started to realize certain things that basic stuff I was not doing well. Now, kind of fast forward a little bit, right? I started to figure it out. And by the 3rd month, I actually hit number 1. So I started getting better results, hit number 1. Ended up staying number 1 for 9 months in a row. Was actually running a small team at that point. Still had to carry my own numbers. I ran a small team, right? Fast forward, ended up staying in sales and sales leadership for just over 13 years of my corporate career. I got to the point in my first 8 years, promoted 12 times my first 8 years. And eventually I was running a sales org of over 110 plus employees. We did over 190 million TCV in new business every single year, total contract value. At the same time, because of the way the role is designed, I also was responsible for 195 million in a year P&L, the full P&L. So I also had dotted line thousands of other employees in other parts of the org as well. That was a big part of my comp structure as well. So that was a lot of fun. And of course, with all those roles, they're all super hard, but was fortunate to hit number one in every single role. Won every single award possible, like President's Club, pretty much every single year. Had a lot of fun doing that before I started my own business in 2019. So it's been quite a journey, but a lot of failing forward, doing really uncomfortable things to get to that point.
There are a lot of elements. We've known each other for years, and there are many parallels that we've had in sales, even in business, like as we've been going well before we knew each other. And I think one of those is just like no sales background, right? Like in not necessarily the profile you would expect of somebody to get into sales. But I think you and I are probably thinking something similar, like, hey, you can make some pretty good money pretty quickly. As you're thinking about this, so week 7, week 8, you go read the books, your wife challenges you like a really good coach. That's awesome. When you look back on that, were any of those books, did any of them stand out? And if you're a salesperson listening to that story right now and you're in that scenario and, hey, I'm going to go grab some books. Did any of them stand out and actually make a difference?
What's really interesting is, they all had like kind of, little impacts here and there because they were like very tactical. But the one book that I stumbled across that had the most impact to me to this day still that I did not expect was something I thought was totally cheesy at the time, which was a Tony Robbins book, Awaken the Giant Within. And what was really funny was it just happened so in the library, maybe it got misplaced or something. I basically stumbled across in the sales section, this book. I'm like, oh, it's a cheesy guru guy, right? I think I remember infomercial. I'm like, so I just kind of picked it up. And I was in a pretty dark place. I was second guessing myself. I had major imposter syndrome. I didn't know I was called to be in sales. I had all this like pressure on myself to perform for myself. I want to make my parents proud, but also like the girl I was dating, she was a little embarrassed that I was in sales, and her parents were looking like, oh, you're in sales. And they're very, very well educated. They're kind of like, what does this guy do? Who's this guy you're with? So I'm like, I need to perform. I need to do great. And I picked up that book, Awaken the Giant Within. And what was really interesting about that book, and you could argue there's some sales principles in there and whatnot. It's so simple when I say it, but it's something that really resonated was like, I'm like, okay, like taking personal accountability and ownership. That was so true. It's like having that mentality of like, whether you win or lose, it's your fault. Whether you get great results or not, it's your fault. That level of that type of ownership is really key. The other key component was learning how my brain worked and how to rewire my brain. We grow up getting wired by the world, society, our parents, and everything else. So we grow up with these belief systems in our mind. We don't even question. We just say, this is how things are. And this is not just religion. This is like everything in life. It's kind of like, I was told, hey, you work hard, you go to school, you graduate, you get a good job, you work for 40 years, and then you retire, right? That's like a made up rule someone told us, right? Now, one of the most powerful things I realized inside that book was, if you don't like the answer, ask a better question. And this is how you start to rewire your brain. So I'll give you a really, really simple example. So I remember I would be cold calling, just be, dialing for dollars, if you will. I'll get my teeth smashed in on the phone. They would curse me out, yell at me, whatever. Hang the phone up, and I'd be so angry and mad. I'm like, oh, that dumb prospect, they're so stupid, blah, blah, blah. And what I didn't realize was I was subconsciously asking myself questions that my brain was answering. And those questions were questions like, why is that prospect so stupid? Why are they the worst? Why is my boss the worst? Why didn't no one train me? Why am I not getting any help? And because of those questions I was asking myself without realizing it, my brain would just give me these responses like, it's the market's fault. It's my boss's fault. The prospect is a jerk. It's X, it's Y. I'm like, wow, that's really disempowering. And I realized, what if I reframed it to a different question? What if before that question was asked by my own brain, what if I gave myself a different question? What if I can reprogram that question to be something like, hey, what's great about this situation? What can I learn about this situation? Okay, what can I do differently potentially to increase my odds of a better outcome on the phones? It was interesting when I started to do that, I started to be more solution oriented. So I started thinking a little bit. I'm like, that's a good point. Well, you know what? Maybe I could be more clear with my value proposition. I could be better objection handling. I could practice more. I can have better confidence. So I asked different questions, so I got better answers. So I actually started them. I even took a little post-it note and I wrote those questions down. Like, what could be great about this? And I taped it to my monitor, and I taped it to a visor in my car, and I taped my mirror in my apartment, and my dingy apartment in the mirror. So this way, in these moments where I was in I was sort of spiral, I could look at it and it would trigger me to start thinking a different way. But it was stuff like that, which, it sounds a little cheesy, but this starts to really plant a lot of seeds early on of how to think through situations in a different way. And I didn't really realize the impact until years later, until someone's like, you really think about these problems in a completely different way. Most people complain about solutions. You are so quick and you move on so rapidly from failure. It's kind of wild. I'm like, it's because I asked better questions. That's all it is. I'm not special. I just move rapidly from I failed at that, no problem. What did I learn? What can I do better? Let's keep going, which can be good and bad in some situations, of course.
You've talked about work ethic. And so like in the context of limiting beliefs, right? So say what we're talking about potentially, or what you're talking about is if you ask a better question, you get a better answer and you get to challenge some of those limiting beliefs that you have.
That's right.
And kind of reframe the entire situation into something else. One of those limiting beliefs may have been around work ethic, right? Like, so from a sales standpoint, as you're into week 5, 6, 7, and you're just cranking it out. And so it's probably wired into you, or you're raised with like a work ethic, and so you're just like hammering activity and it's not getting you to where you want to go. But my question was if I work harder, I will get better outcomes. Was that a limiting belief? And if it was, what is the role of work ethic in sales or in business or in anything?
I used to always believe work ethic by itself was going to make me win at anything. And it was just because I grew up working really, really hard. So I had these beliefs inserted inside me as a kid growing up. I saw my parents come with absolutely nothing. My dad worked his ass off, 18-hour days, 6-7 days a week, never took vacations, had to sacrifice so much, right? My mom and him. And because of that, they were able to build, a comfortable middle-class life from absolutely nothing, which I think was tremendous. And so I saw that, and I did that with them, right? So I was put to work at a young age, right? And I was successful, doing that. So I remember even like when I started having to work, my parents sold a restaurant because they had a restaurant. I went and got other jobs, like part-time jobs, and I would like be the best very quickly. Not because I was like talented, but I just was more effective and worked harder. So for example, like, let's just say like, I remember my first job was selling Speedos in a Speedo store that's so competitive gear. I was a competitive swimmer growing up, so it kind of made sense. So
it used to be your LinkedIn headline too.
It used to be at one point. So
yeah.
So most people, they would just sit in this retail store, sit at the counter, wait for customers to come, and then when they come, they just kind of just take an order, and that's really it. Well, I was like, I would get bored first off. So I'm like, how can I'm gonna work here for 4 hours after school. I'm gonna maximize it. So like literally as customers came in, I was Johnny Knoxville. I was already up front saying, hey, how's it going? What brought you in? How can I best support you? What questions do you have? And then I would share insights that was valuable for them. And lo and behold, because I was so consistent with this and so helpful in this situation, I outsold everyone. Not because I was good at selling, because I was just trying to help someone. I worked harder at it, right? So it wasn't really surprising when they would send me to swim meets on weekends. And these swim meets, I'd wake up at 3, 4 in the morning. I would drive 1 to 2 hours. I would go to the office, load up their little 1991 Ford Ranger pickup truck full of swim gear in the back, drive an hour, hour and a half. Then I'd stand at a swim meet with a bunch of kids for 12 hours. I wouldn't even go to the bathroom because I couldn't leave the gear out. I had to stand out and I would be slinging Speedos for like 12 hours, all right? I wouldn't eat and drink a single thing because I didn't want to go to the bathroom. I would cell lights out. I pack it up. I pack the truck up. I hit the restroom. I go get food for the first time. I'm back at the store maybe 8, 9 p.m. at night, and I do it the next day. And I wasn't paying on commission, but I worked really hard towards those things. So, and I got tons of kudos for that, right? When I went and got an internship at Enterprise Rent-A-Car as an intern selling insurance, they have caps now, but at the time, they would try to cap the interns at like 55 hours a week. They don't want them to burn out. Now they had these management trainees, these college grads who would work 60, 70 hours and they would not pay them very much. So it was all hourly, if you will, and they got overtime. I convinced my boss to send the MTs home and let me work instead, because I would happily work 80 to 100 hours a week, because I could, number one, make more money because I would get overtime, right? And I would outsell them and everything else. So I'll generate more profitable growth than them, right? So in my mind, and I was quite successful doing that. Number one out of 40 plus people in the whole area for selling insurance and upgrades. Throughout this whole time until my corporate career, I had reinforced this belief: when I work hard, I am successful. When I do more of everything. So that meant like even in the enterprise days, like, you know, like I would write more contract stuff. So the more contracts you write, the more you can sell. So I'm like, I'll do like 3, 4x everyone else. Like that's just like, people like add more volume and more everything. So they're like, when I do quantity, I win. It's that simple. So then I got into B2B sales. And I remember like very first week, and I go, my boss says, "Hey, Marcus, you're day one. I want you to go outside and knock on doors." And I said, "Sure. How many doors should I knock on?" Like I have no concept of like what that even means and what's good look like. He said, "Go knock on 30 doors. If you do that, it's a great day. And you'll probably book some meetings and maybe someone will close the deals." I'm like, that makes perfect sense. I'll walk in over 60 that day. I don't book a single meeting. I'm like, that's crazy. I go back to my boss. I'm like, "Hey, I walked in a 60. I'm like, nothing happened. He's like, "Go back out there again." Next day, I walked in over 60 again, 60 different doors. So by foot, I walked in over 120 businesses by foot. I literally didn't get a call. I literally walked out of the building and just started walking down Northeast Columbia Boulevard in this industrial area of Portland. And I was going by foot. I come back, same thing. I'm like, "Boss, this is crazy. I have done double the activity anyone's even doing, right? Just in those 2 days. What do I do next?" He's like, "Now you call them." So next day, I go and I rip through my 120 plus calls. I don't book a single meeting. I'm like, I don't know what's going on right now. Like, you call them again. Next day, I call them again. Of course, not all of them answer, right? Again, no results. So I'm like freaking out now, okay? Like, because I'm like, I'm outworking everyone. Now, fast forward 4 or 5 weeks, it kind of goes like that. And I'll tell you right now, most people was doing maybe 25% of the activity. And I'm like, this is insane. And when I went to my boss, I'm like, he would just say, "It's a numbers game." Now, I'm not a mathematician, but a 0% conversion off anything that I'm doing is still 0% results. This doesn't make sense. He's like, "It's just a numbers game. Keep going out there." I'm like, oh my God. So like logically, it just didn't make sense to me. When I start to really think about this, it's like, it was kind of like, you know, I was driving the wrong direction on a road trip. Doesn't matter how fast I go, how hard I go that direction. If I'm in the wrong direction, I'm not going to get to where I want to go. And that's when I realized at that point, I'm like, man, like, yes, for sure, hard work is important, but is it the right type of hard work? Is it the right type of work that's actually moving the needle? And that's something I see happen across the board for a lot of salespeople now, a lot of sales leaders, which is maybe they do work hard, but they're not working hard at the right things. And ultimately, they never get to where they want to go. Because if you can focus on the right things that actually drive results, you'll get far better results than just working hard.
Rewind back to that. If you're that manager and you have that rep, and that rep shows up and says, "Dude, I'm crushing activity. I've knocked the doors. I've made the calls. I've been," like, that manager, in my mind, like, didn't manage properly. Like, that's not a sales coach, because they just said, just step on the gas harder. Even though you're going the wrong direction, Mark, just step on the gas harder. But now looking back, if you're in that manager seat and you have a rep, what would you have told Marcus then?
Yeah, great question. Well, I'll give you I'll tell you a story of exactly, because I've running teams, this would happen all the time. So I remember I hired this great rep. Her name was Lisa, and she had already been really successful in past roles, right? And brought her on my team, and she was a grinder. I mean, like, so we had very high expectations in our organization, which was you need to book 16 new logo discovery calls every single week. That was the minimum expectation. 16 every single week, right? She started booking 25 a week. Like it was like 23 to 25 per week. Insane. I was like, oh my, this is insane. Week one though, like, and some of them like it could be small to big deals, right? So we sold everything from SMB, mid-market to enterprise, right? So we set a high bar intentionally. So first week she closed like one deal. And I'm like, that's a little weird. Like, you run 22, like only one closed, right? Next week, one deal. I'm like, next week, one deal. And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. She's closing one out of like 25 calls. Like that literally doesn't make sense. And it's like, they're going to stagger. So you can like have follow-ups. They should start to compound over time, right? She's very, very confident. She's kind of like, oh my God, like what's going on? This is different. And it was simple. I just went out and well, for number one, I did two things. Number one, we had a field day set up, right? So I could see what she's doing. I first sit in, I listen to how she makes calls. Okay. Very quickly, I'll realize, okay, she is not qualifying on the call. So she's basically meeting anybody with a pulse, right? So that was like a very easy, immediate coaching component. I was like, cool, hey, no problem. Here, once you book the meeting, here's like 3 questions to ask, just to qualify really quick, and then you can secure the meeting, right? You might book less meetings, which is okay, but you're better off having, 10 qualified meetings than 25 unqualified people, meet with the wrong people, too low level, etc. So that was the first piece I coached her on, right? Then we went to the field. And because of how she'd been doing it, these are also non-decision makers, right? Now, that's okay. If you are highly skilled in the situation, you can coach them through, etc. So I saw very quickly that she did not know how to coach a champion, did not know how to multi-thread, and basically run the deal through to a close and set really good follow-up steps as a result of that. So then I coached her on those things too. And what was really interesting was, the next week, or her next phone block session, if you will, or that following week, she booked like 12 appointments, but far more qualified. Closes 3 deals that week. Okay. And then the next week, she's kind of averaging 12-ish appointments. She closes like 5 deals in that week because now she has some follow-ups that are closing on top of that. Fast forward, she started to build more momentum over time, right? And just kept closing more and more. She kept kind of maintaining a 10 to 12 qualified disclosures each week, closing 3 to 6 deals every single week consistently, right? She ended up winning Rookie of the Year her first year, head and President's Club and whatnot, right? But ultimately, the process I did was very simple. I actually went and diagnosed and took a look at where the rubber meets the road. I wasn't an armchair quarterback. I wasn't a keyboard warrior. I got out of my office. I wanted to see exactly what's going on so I can coach and prescribe exactly to her constraint. So it's not some generic advice like, hey, just you need to work harder, make more calls. Like, Lisa, you need to say these 3 things on the call to qualify. Let's role play now. So we can role play so she gets that dialed. Okay, cool. On sales calls, you need to do these 2 things. Let's role play. And then we worked on that, right? As a great leader, your number one job is to make your team successful. So if you just sit back and hope they're going to figure it out, maybe some will, maybe some won't, right? But at the end of the day, your number one job is to make them successful, because if they're successful, you'll be successful too.
It's kind of like a more versus better argument, right? Like sometimes you need more of something, like more activity. Sometimes no amount of activity is going to matter. You need to do it better. And I recently came across the definition of work by physics standards. So physics actually defines work, and hopefully I don't butcher it, but it's the formula for work in physics is force times distance times theta, which is like alignment, right? So the actual definition is force is the amount of activity, distance is the amount of progress that something happens, and then theta or alignment is kind of the strategy. Is it even aligned with what you want? So you take your scenario, this person that's selling, the force is there, the activity is there. And in a lot of cases, like doors knocked or calls made. In a lot of cases, even distance is there. Like you're seeing numbers on a board. Like, so there's numbers coming through. She's booking a lot of appointments. But the underlying thing that's missing is the alignment. Like there's a strategic piece that's simply that's not working, which means no matter how much effort you put into pushing that wall, and no matter how far that wall goes, it needed to go the other way. Like it's the wrong thing. And it's like a steal from Hormozi a little bit, like the more versus better, right? To simplify it. So my follow-up question to you would be, how do you go about determining, is this a more problem or is this a better problem?
I need to see what they're doing. I mean, the nice thing is, like, as a sales, I was a rep, I was a leader, so I know what great looks like. So when I take a look at what they're actually doing, let's just say if it's cold calls, if I listen to a cold call, if they don't sound great, are there basic things that need to be taught still? All right. So the first thing is they had to actually get better at it, right? Okay, so cool. So what I'm gonna focus on first, hey, do they know what great looks like? Let me teach them what great looks like. Okay. Have them do it with me. I think the mistake a lot of times a lot of leaders make is the reps does it one time with him, sounds okay. They say, okay, keep practicing that. Get after it and make some calls tomorrow, book some meetings tomorrow. And they're kind of like, they're like, see you later. Well, here's the reality. I believe more, especially in sales, sometimes starts before the game starts. And what I mean specifically is, let's just say the same rep. If I'm like, okay, they don't know what good looks like, so they actually need better and more. They need both, really. So first I teach them what great looks like. Okay, cool. Now you know what that looks like. Now let's role play. And I'll have them do what I call real plays. So these are really tough role plays with objections, whatever I'm coaching on. I'm going to do multiple times, dozens of times till they can do it with confidence. Let's just say it's 15 times, they do 15 times. Great. Okay. So now they can go make calls. So when they make calls now, is it how they were doing it in the role play or real play? If it's not, they need more repetition again. So they might need more real plays. Let's just say, for example, because you'll have like some people over time, they get their skill. I had some reps, their skill gets really good, so they know what to do, but they're not doing it. So I'll give you an example. I had this rep. His name was Forrest. Very skilled. He was a fast learner. He was able to basically mimic everything I taught him within just show him once. So it's kind of wild. Highly skilled and a very fast learner. And he was really consistent in doing on calls. So it's like I could teach him, he'd role play back perfectly and immediately apply. He'd photograph from memory, something like that. Except he was really lazy. He would book the least amount of calls that he could book just to hit his number. And for someone like him, his conversions are already great. So we knew he was doing a lot of right things. He was already great in terms of the better part. So we don't need better. We just need more. He was the guy where he would close really big deals and they would kind of save his quarter. So he'd be posting goose eggs the entire quarter. And then the last week, the week 12 of the week 30, he closed a monster to cover his whole number. And it would be just to hit the number, right? It wasn't even above that, right? So that was always a challenge with someone like him because I'm like, you are so talented. The rest of the team wishes they had your skill level. If you just literally increase and just did a little bit more, you would make exponentially more for yourself and get your goal outcome you want to get to. But his problem was his self-concept was really low. So he had a very low standard in life. So he was good with that. So, but that's an example where sometimes you have to do purely more.
I've encountered these salespeople a lot in my career, and it's the lazy salesperson. And they're a blessing and a curse. Some of the best tactics for how to get better, I've learned from watching lazy salespeople. And there's a couple that from my career who are really good. So talented, very, very good. And if they're listening right now, they know who I'm talking about, close to top performers, because they mastered the art of figuring out, how do I get maximum output with the least amount of effort? And they took pride in it. The ratio is what they took pride in. So if I can come in and make 3 phone calls and do what it takes somebody else 70, I almost don't want to make the other 20 because it screws up the kind of what we were talking about earlier, the story I'm telling myself in my head. I look at my ratio, right? And so studying those people, I've learned a lot about, well, shit, what is it that they're doing, right? What can I extract from the person that makes 3 calls and does what somebody else does in 70 and take those best practices? What I have found is that oftentimes trying to push that person to 2x, 3x, 4x the activity, it doesn't work. You know what I mean? I noticed you said when you were talking Did you say real play versus role play?
Yeah, real plays. That's what we call them.
Is that
real
on
plays.
purpose? Are you real
Oh,
plays?
Yeah, we do
Why?
real plays. Get beat up, get bloody. For example, if you're going to do real plays with cold calls, I have made tens of thousands of cold calls. I can only think of one call. I sent my script, said, "Hey, can we meet at Thursday today?" And they said, "I'm so glad you called. We should totally meet." Like I was so thrown off. That's the only time. Every other time, 2, 3, 4, 5 no's. If that's real life, and we want to prepare them for the worst case outcome, we need to train them for the worst case outcome. So this way, they perform to the level of system they're trained to, versus you train like 1 or 2 no's or none in some cases.
I don't know if you know Jack Daly. He's sales manager that I early in my sales management career, I followed some of his content, his courses and stuff. And he used to call it role practice. And he was like, no, like this isn't playtime. Like if we come in here and we play and we go soft, like we're not learning the skills. He said, you don't go watch an NFL team practice and see them just kind of like playing flag football. Like they've got to train to take the hit, and like the more real it is, the better you're going to do.
Well, it's like the saying, right? Amateurs play more than they practice. Pros practice more than they play, right? And they practice with intensity.
The way you play is the way you practice. Do you mention the Awaken the Giant Within, the Tony Robbins book, which by the way, insanely influential for me too. Like in early on in my career. So I very much relate to that. Did you catch the Tony Robbins Hormozi interview? Did you watch much of that?
I did. That was an amazing interview, I thought personally.
What was your biggest takeaway?
I think it's a good reminder that there are levels to the game. When you see someone like Alex Hormozi, very successful at a very young age, very young guy, right? And like, so I think outside in, I think we all have a perception about him, and it's interesting. It's like when I saw it, I'm like, I don't think he's actually happy. And I think a lot of people kind of say like this guy who's been really successful, that a lot of people kind of put on a pedestal, doesn't seem that happy, right? And I thought that was like really, really interesting. And I think and it was good. It's such a good reminder of this too. I've always used about, Tony Robbins. I think it's like, there's like six key, critical things that every human has to have, right? Like certainty, uncertainty, et cetera. And contribution is a big one, right? And that was one thing that Hormozi didn't really have. And it was interesting when he said it, because I relate to him, because I'm also very logical in so many ways, where it's like we donate lots of money every year. Obviously not as much as him, but we donate lots of money every single year. We try to do philanthropy, like giving money and stuff like that, because I have more money than time. Just having Tony walk through and talk about all the things he's doing. I mean, I'm like, man, this guy was so busy. He runs like, I don't know how many businesses. It's like 12 billion a year, something like that. And he still is able to fly to Africa and like spend like a month out there, do these things, right? Was like very inspiring. But then I think also a great reminder of like, hey, when you actually go there doing the thing, it feels very different than when you just wire money or pull out your credit card to donate money. And it hits in a different way. And that was a good reminder for myself to do more of that, right? So like, I think it applies to everything in life, right? So it's like, right now I'm in a season of my life where I like to do more stuff in my kids' school, right? So I'm trying to make sure, like, we donate money and stuff to the school because they're trying to raise money. But I'm also trying to make sure, hey, my chaperoning for field trips. Am I showing up and doing stuff with the kid, right? Because it's going to contribute in a different way to that community, right? So that was a good reminder for that. But that was quite a powerful interview.
It was really powerful. In fact, you know my wife Sam, like she actually watched it, and she's like, when it comes to like the content we ingest, it's very different. And she watched it and thought, had a very different take on it from a personal standpoint. And I thought it was interesting. But one of the things I've been thinking about since that discussion, I want to get your take on, and it was the conversation around suffering. And it was the reason it's really an interesting topic for me is because I thought it was kind of a pivotal moment in that interview. And the gist of this is, Alex's view is you need to find something worth suffering for. Like basically anything that you do, you're going to have to eat some shit along the way. right? Like no matter what your passion is, no matter what your goal is, no matter what, like if you want to be a trial lawyer, guess what? You're going to have to go through a lot of books, a lot of schooling, a lot of, administrative shit. It's not just the closing arguments, right? It's not just the fun part of the job. And I think Alex is, paraphrasing for what he has said is part of doing anything big involves doing a whole bunch of shit you don't want to do. And the reason most people don't do the shit they really want to do is because they think it's just that thing and they give up along the way when they encounter the friction. So he says, like, if you just retrain it, kind of like you were talking about earlier, like if you reframe it and you say, no, just find a goal worth suffering for, and it's a lot easier because you lower your expectation. And as he's having that conversation with Tony's basically, he says, he's like, fuck suffering. Why would you, in order to pursue the thing you want, why the fuck do you think you have to suffer, man? Like you don't have to suffer. Like you get to do these things. You get to do the stuff that you're doing. And I've gone back and forth on it because I think one of the challenges, like in entrepreneurship, like a lot of the reasons people give up in business is because their expectation is so high that they're gonna reach something big in a short period of time. And I do think that there's a healthy level of, if you go into it and say, this is going to suck, like this, I'm going to, like Elon Musk says, like, you got to eat some glass, right? Like you're going to have to go through this. So if you lower your expectation, the likelihood of persisting is going to be higher. At the same time, if the goal that you have is a 15-year goal, doesn't that kind of mean that you're basically eating shit for 15 years. And that doesn't seem like a fun way to live. And I don't know if you have a take on it, but I'd be curious, like when you hear that, is someone right? Is there something in the middle, or what's your take on that topic?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, right? And I think obviously it's like, I think the most amazing thing will be like you pick a goal, you go after, you get immediate wins right after, right? But I've also learned, and I look back in my life, and in the moments I have learned the most, it's always been the toughest moments in my life, right? It's like always in the darkness, right? Where it's, later on you don't realize the lesson that you're actually in. Like I look back in life and, like I would say a pretty good childhood, right? But I started working in the restaurant at the age of 5. Like I literally, like I had to buy my own toys, like as a kid. Like we were very, very poor. I worked all the time as a kid. So my childhood wasn't the same as most kids was, right? When I started doing sports and whatnot, my parents never came to any events, right? And it's interesting because in hindsight, when I look back to all these things that happened for me, I'm like, wow, there are certain lessons I have now because of that experience. In the moment, I hated it, I regretted it, right? But years later, I'm like, I'm so thankful that happened. And, I've just learned to try to have this perspective for me personally, which is to understand that the process is the prize. The process of wherever you want to go to is the actual prize of who you become. And it's easier said than done. So there's times where, like when you're making a big move, it's hard to remember that, right? It's especially when you have a bunch of like bad stuff happening, right? Like I remember this was like years ago. I was in corporate America, and it was like my number doubled for the year. I'm like, oh God, how am I gonna do this, right? It was my second year as a director at a big org, 100 plus people, like I mentioned, right? We started having all these like HR issues with certain managers, like all these investigations were happening. I'm like, oh my God, like I don't have backfills ready to go. I have a huge number to hit. Like it's having a trickle effect. We're having turnover now because of it. Like, that's at the same time, I had a manager die. Like they passed away, like due to like alcohol poisoning. Like they just like, their liver basically failed, right? And then their mom started to attack me on social media and blame me and say that I killed their son, and then during that same time, like my parents, who've been married for 40 years at the time, were wanting to get a divorce. And I was like, and I had a young baby as well. I'm like, there's all this stuff going on. I'm like, oh my God, like it's horrible, right? But in hindsight, it like forced me to become a better version of me. Right, it forced me to learn how to prioritize better, how to deal with uncertainty, and get through these hard parts, how to focus on what really matters, and that was really, really powerful. And I remember around the same time I read a quote. And it's not my quote. I can't remember whose quote it is, but it goes along the lines of like, when bad things happen, it's like you have to remember that you can think it happens to me or happens for me. If you think it happens for me, then you can reposition how you actually approach the situation, right? You become less of a victim. And that was a good reminder of that time. So when I hear And I think there's a lot of power in words. So like when someone says, well, you're just going to suffer, right? That's not the word I would choose in that time. Like, I don't know if I would say I was suffering. I think to me, that's like, that means I have zero control. When I hear that person's suffering, right? It was a tough time. It was a challenge, and it's a dark time. But I also know, like in life, after every sunny day, there's always after every rainy day, there's always sun, right? It always happens. Like what goes down must come up. What goes up must come down. So I think it's just why when I think about it from a larger perspective, I don't think it's a bad thing, and especially if you have a long time horizon. Like if you have a 15-year time horizon and you're able to think that far, that is like really, really powerful. Because I think about stuff like right now that we're doing that I'm not gonna see any yield from. All right. Like for example, like I think about, you have young kids, so do I. It's like, we put my kid in a really, really nice, private school because we're fortunate to be able to do that, right? And it is not cheap. I mean, this costs more than college tuition, right? And from a logical perspective, I'm like, what's my ROI going to be this year, right? But I know this is not a 1-year play. It's not a 10-year play. This is really a 20, 30-year play. So this kid is going to be set up to think through and how to adapt to the future world because he's not going to be memorizing stuff. He's going to learn how to actually think. So I think if you have a longer time horizon, you can change some of the words that you're using to, I would say, hopefully more empowering words. So you look at the situation in a more positive light, and you can think about the greater future that you're actually going after.
I never heard you talk about that. The manager that died, and then you being kind of attacked and under the gun. And I know in hindsight, you can say, hey, it's we all know there's going to be a brighter day at the end of this. Like we know that. How did you handle that at the time?
So it was really tough. So I'll give you more context because like I gave you the light version, right? So this is a leader I had. I got promoted to be a director. I took over one part of the market. I don't want to say which one, but one part of the market for obvious reasons. And that had been a dumpster fire of a team. Tons of turnover, missing number for years. Brought in a new manager, okay? Worked closely with his manager, completely turned the team around. First year, his President's Club, sent multiple reps to President's Club. I mean, it becomes like, oh my God, like, what an incredible, like, wow, it's amazing. And great guy, really great guy. And he actually moved to the city for us, right? Which is amazing with his wife. Second year, I started to know some shifts, and they were actually physical shifts. So I'll say, like, physically tall, good-looking guy with like a former model, right? Like good-looking dude, and he started to look off. Like skin was really blotchy, bloated looking. Not that it's bloated, just looked off. We're like, this is strange, right? And he started just like to miss certain things that he would never miss. Like he was off of his numbers. He wasn't like dial with it, like getting back to me at a certain time. Like he'd say he's going just a very unlike him, right? It's kind of weird when you see a top performer do certain things that's consistent and something that's changing. I'm coaching this guy through it. And I'm also trying to say, like, what's actually going on? I'm trying to understand, like, hey, is everything okay? What's going on with you? Try to get him kind of tell me, right? And I can't go into the exact specifics, but he kept doing certain things, and we ended up terminating the guy. To terminate this guy, right? It was all documented. It was a whole process, right? I was really disappointed because I'm like, there's probably something going on. I don't know what it is, but he would not tell us, right? So, anyways, we ended up terminating the guy. A week later, the guy, unfortunately, we had backfills and all that stuff ready to go. So we had someone on his team who was going to easily backfill, and the backfill manager calls me Saturday night, which is very weird. That's like they don't call me after hours. Like this is like so I'm like, hello. He's like, hey, so and so, the ex manager, he's in a coma. He's in a hospital. I'm like, what? I was like shocked. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, I'm not sure. Like, so I give you a quick heads up. Like, I'll let you know a little more in a little bit. Calling me out an hour later. He's like, okay. His liver is failing. Because he was friends with the guy. He's like, I hadn't heard from him in a couple of days. I went to go check on him, right? Found him like just like passed out in his place. Inside he had a Jeep. Inside his Jeep was like tons of like empty half gallons, like vodka half gallons, just like filled, right? And turns out that like his team knew. His team knew that he's a big like kind of a private, like a silent drinker. He would drink by himself. He would go home and just binge drink, right? Didn't realize this is the whole thing. So, anyways, had been going on for, I guess, for years, because I mean, this guy was like 31, 32. So you can imagine 31, 32 drinks a level where your liver fails is an insane amount of alcohol. He kind of tells him that, okay, calls me half an hour later, he just died. And I have this like level of guilt where I'm like, oh my God, like, did I drive him to this point? Like, was I too hard of a boss? Did I push him to this level, et cetera? I just had no idea. Like, and then, later on, I talked to my manager the next day, and he's like, I have to tell you something. Like, this is like, he's always been a big drinker. This is like, this has been his thing, but like, it's somehow gotten like worse, just like over whatever. He was going through a tough time with his ex-wife. They started separated. They started having all these issues, and it probably just magnified it, right? It also turns out that his sister is also an alcoholic. So and I think the dad too. So there's some sort of like, genetic thing going on, right? So I'm like, oh my God, this is like, and I still feel horrible regardless, because I'm like, I genuinely care about this guy. And I was like, I thought maybe it pushed him over or whatever, right? Obviously he had other challenges, before that. So I'm like, this is crazy. And then the mom started texting me, and the mom she got my number. I guess from the manager. The manager was like, oh, she asked for my number. I'm like, that's fine. And then so she started texting me, and just started like blaming me. I was like, hey, you killed my son. You made him drink himself to death. Blah blah blah. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even know what to do. I was like, I was like, this is horrible. And then like, I reached out to HR, and HR's direction was very clearly, hey, like, it's obviously terrible. You just cannot respond. I'm like, well, let me at least call her. They're like, she's Marcus, like, you're an exec with a company. You cannot call her and talk to her, because you might say something you don't intend to, that can be misinterpreted, right? You can't text her. Like, you just have to like let her be, and just like, don't respond. Just do not respond. I'm like, oh my God. So I'm like, oh my God, I'm feeling like horrible now, right? I was like, oh, what's going to happen here? Then the next day, it's like a Monday, she starts tagging me in these posts online on LinkedIn. Hey, Marcus Shan killed my son, blah, blah, blah. Just over and over and over. I'm like, oh my God. So I let HR know as well, right? There was no happy ending to the story. I basically kind of let it dissolve, right? Felt horrible the entire time. But it was one of those things where I'm like, man, like, I was not thinking like there's a great sunnier day beyond this. I'm just like, I just felt like enormous like guilt. And what the guilt was, when I really thought about it later on, when I had more time to kind of process it, was like, why didn't I push him to get help sooner? Like, I didn't know what he had. So now I know. I'm like, there's like certain signs. I'm like, well, I looked up later. I'm like, classic signs. They get all puffy looking. The skin looks a little blotchy. I thought his skin started looking a little yellow, so it was jaundice. Right? That's probably what it was. Right? So that was like these realizations. If I'd known, like, I could like, and again, we had a lot of requirements, because it's a Fortune 500 company. I couldn't just come out and even if I did know, I couldn't be like, are you an alcoholic? Do you need to get help? Do you want to get help right now? We have resources. I couldn't do that. They would have to bring it to us, because you can't accuse people of stuff like that, right? There's certain requirements by HR. So, but it's kind of like, in hindsight, I'm like, man, like, if I had known, could I at least guide the conversation more to create more psychological safety? Keep in mind, I've had thousands of reps, right? So these are some of these isolated situations, right? But like, I've had reps where I've learned over time they had like certain drug addictions. Because of these situations, I'm able to kind of spot it early on and get them help, and get them to like, to have conversation where they tell me, so they can like, I can get them support so they can go get healthy for themselves. Not for me, not for a company, but so this way they can go and take care of themselves. Because sometimes they're in a situation where it's so bad they can't help themselves. And it was interesting, because this was my first time ever knowing about like an actual alcoholic situation. There's past times Whereas all the drug things I had learned over time, like, okay, these are some signs. I got to see if I can kind of guide them into it and give them some help, because ultimately I want them to thrive in life, right? I don't want to put them in a situation where suddenly something bad happens, or they get in an accident, or they just do something terrible and they regret it. So these are always the hard things about leadership as part of it, right? But in hindsight, I'm like, I learned a lot, and now I know the science, so now, and I've had situations past that where I have suspicions. I'm able to have different conversations to hopefully get them to realize it, whether they get help through the company's resources or they go on their own. But at least they know they're addressing it so they can actually take care of themselves.
Man, I'm sorry to hear that. That's I'd never heard that before from you, man. A lot of things when you're in a leadership role, especially, I mean, whether you lead one person or 1,000 people, like you're going to have scenarios come up where people's lives affect them at work. Like the whole leave all that at the door is bullshit. Like it's impossible, especially since so much of sales is psychological. Like there's a tactical element, there's an activity element, but then there's a psychological element and what you project. When somebody's having the personal issues, whether it's a divorce, alcoholism, like you mentioned, drug addiction, or just a whole string of fucking bad days, or something's going on with their kid at home. Like anything life happens. As a leader, when you have to approach those sensitive conversations, how do you do that? Like that may be an extreme example, but if you had to go have a sensitive conversation similar to that with a sales rep today, or one that may have been more common, what do you do beforehand, and how do you approach that discussion?
Yeah, 100%. So I've learned a lot over the years, and a lot of it had to do with me just basically doing it poorly, right? And when I think about it because I'm a nerd, I like frameworks. I think about, it's like, if you're going to have a conversation of any sort that potentially could be hard, I think about the triple T's. And I learned this years ago from this guy, Clint, who was a VP of sales. He says, Marcus, if you want to have a tough conversation, you got to think about your tact, your tone, and your timing. Your tact, tone, timing. I'm like, that makes a lot of sense. He's like, you need all three, because you can have the best tact, the best tone, but if your timing's not good, it's going to be a real tough conversation, right? I'm like, that's a good point. So I remember, I'll just give an example, right? So I had this rep, and I was watching him, my manager called me up. This is like my Portland manager time. I was a director. He's like, hey, I think there's something going on with this rep, Nick. I'm like, okay, what do you mean? He's like, I'm not sure. He just seems a little off. Like maybe he's on something or not. I'm not even sure how this conversation, right? I said, okay, let's do it together, right? I'm in Portland. It's great. I'm on non-travel week. Let's do it together. I'm like, only the first piece is, let's invite him to coffee. Let's just like try to break up the environment. Like let's not go to my office. So he's like sitting across from the desk, let's not go like by the HR room. Like let's just try to put him in like a psychologically safe place. So I say, hey, so, we kind of position like, hey, let's just have like, this is just just a check-in chat. Let's go to get some coffee, to get some Starbucks. That's fine. So we go to Starbucks, right? And, we sit down. They still get a little nervous regardless. That's kind of how they are anyways. So we had kind of the normal rapport, and, and I'll say as well, his performance had been going down as well. I didn't know some of the stuff because I travel a lot. I didn't know maybe some of the stuff that my manager's worried about. He's like, oh, maybe I think he looks a little high, but I'm not sure. Like, I was like, so we saw his performance going down anyways, right? We sit down and we're having the coffee, we're kind of warming up to it. I said, and then once I get past the kind of rapport, I was just my tone's really, really intentional. I'm like, hey, so, Nick, how are you doing? Like, oh, it's great. I'm doing really good. I'm working really hard. I'm going to close some deals this week. I promise all my numbers will get back up. I'm like, oh, dude, forget about your numbers. Like, just, how are you? Oh, good. But I promise, boss, I'll get my numbers back. I'm like, it's fine, man. Well, hey, listen, can I share with you what's on my mind? And you can share if you're comfortable. He's like, okay. So not really sure where it's going to go. I said, hey man, so, you've been part of an org now for about 3 months or so. And, and I feel like, your behavior is kind of just your attitude kind of shifts a little bit. I can't put my finger quite, but it just seems a little different. And I'm curious, like, are you okay? And you see him almost like, and you look how it's down. And I can tell there's something on his mind, right? Like he wants to say something. I think I just been stressed. I'm like, okay. He's like, I just been stressed. This is a hard job. You and the company have really high expectations. So I think I'm just adapting to it. I just didn't buy it, right? I'm like, okay. And he kind of sighs again. He's like, and I can tell he's got something he wants to say. He's not willing to say. And again, I can't come out and say something like, hey, do you have a drug problem? Do you have whatever? You're not supposed to do that, right? So I'm like, when I brought you on, you told me you have these big goals. Here's some of your goals. My number one goal is to help you get those goals. So if there's anything that you feel is an obstacle or in your way, or you need some support with, like, just let me know. Okay. Like, I'm not worried about your number. Like, you're new. It's you're only 3 months. Like, I'm not even worried about that. Just keep doing the right things. Do what, Andrew, your manager is having you do, and you'll be completely fine. But I just want to make sure you know that I'm here to support you. And same with Andrew and same with our whole team. Okay. He's like, okay, well, thank you. So I'm like, okay. So we leave. I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I drive back to the office. I call up Andrew. I say, hey man, like, he said he's probably stressed. Whatever. I mean, it's just, I don't know. We'll see, right? Like, but just keep a close eye on it. Make sure support him, right? He's just stressed, is what he says. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe something else. So we go back to the office. At the end of the day, it's like 4:00. I hear a knock on my door, my office door. He's like, hey, do you have time to talk? I said, yeah. Come on, let's talk. And he's like, listen, I haven't been truthful with you. He starts crying. Just like tears are coming down. He's like, this is really hard for me to say, but I'm an addiction. Like, I have a drug addiction. Like, he's like, I'm addicted to meth. And I'm like, I was completely thrown off because no one's ever said that to me before, right? And it kind of made sense. Like, kind of the area we grew up in, it's like in certain parts of the Oregon, Wash area, it's like meth is very heavy. And he came from a small town. So I'm like, it's like not a crazy surprise, right? So I'm like, okay, there are resources the company has. Like, there's certain resources that can help you. You can take a leave, right? This is what you got to do next. You can take a leave. There's support resources to get you into a program. So once you're ready to come back, you can come back. Would you like me to help you with getting some of those resources? He's like, yes, I've been trying to quit for a long time. Yes. And like, he gave me a big hug. He's still crying the whole time, right? And then we got with my HR, we got all the resources, right, to be able to do it, right? So there is no perfect conversation, but if you can kind of create that environment for them, to hopefully be able to have that open conversation, hopefully they can have that conversation. Like, we're all human. We all have vices, right? And I think it's our duty to help people the best that we can once we hear about these type of things.
Well, it shows the kind of leader you are. I think that's awesome. Like a good leader is going to have some interesting conversations with their team, because just like in sales, if you've built rapport and you've built some trust, you're probably going to reach a different level of conversation and depth with your team than other people are. So I think it says a lot about you. And, that's one of the benefits for all the, the social media beats up on, 9 to 5s and big companies. Like, that's one of the benefits. You have resources and shit like that to actually be able to help when something like that comes up. Something I was going to ask you is, the way that I met you was, unbeknownst to me, right? Like, it's like two parallel paths. We both leave very successful sales careers, and we're kind of building online, like, independently. And I had moved to Cabo, and I had this idea of, I'm just going to do some consulting. Like, this shit's easy. Some of my mentors do consulting. They make a ton of money. Like, they have 2 or 3 clients. This can't be that hard. I know a lot of stuff, so I should be able to sell that knowledge. And I get to Cabo and I realize there's so much that I don't know. Like, like digital marketing, like, it's one thing to run an 8 or a 9-figure business in your case, but like, it's one thing to do that. And it's another thing to build from 0 to 1. It's one thing to do it in person and then build online. So I get into this mix and I'm like, what do you mean I need to figure out my offer? And I got to figure out my marketing and do this and do that, like, I copy and blah, blah, blah. So like candidly, I'm kind of struggling. Like it's like I'm trying to figure out how to do this, and I'm scanning Upwork for jobs at this point. And here I am, like a CEO from private equity. I've got an MBA. I'm like, fuck, man, I'll just an hourly rate playbook writing at this point, and I didn't seem to be figuring it out. And I saw you online and on LinkedIn. And you see, at least like outside looking in, you seem to be doing better than me. You were a couple steps ahead of me on that front. And, you just had it like tightened up, like buttoned up. And I reached out to you and I said, hey, dude, and I don't remember the exact words, but I was like, hey, I wanted to know if we could hop on a call, because I'd love to hear what you're doing and how it's working, and get some tips and basically pick your brain. And you shot back a note and you were like, yeah, dude, of course. Like, here's what I'm doing. Like right out of the gates, didn't know me, and just said, sure. And gave me some pointers. And then we hopped on a call, and you were a complete open book, and you have been since I've known you. You're very transparent about it. You were incredibly willing to help. Most people aren't, right? Like most people feel guarded. Most people, like when they reach a level of success or they've got something, they become very, very protective of that. From day one, you've been very open and helpful to me in getting started. And my question is kind of like full circle to what you were talking about earlier: better questions, better answers, reframing things. What do you believe about helping other people or being an open book as an entrepreneur that maybe a bunch of other people don't?
So one of the things I saw as a key behavior growing up that really was first shocked when I first saw it, but then was really impressed over time, was seeing how my dad approached an abundance mindset. Like I would see him do certain things. And I'll give you a really simple example. Like I remember, this is like I was 17 years old. And so my dad has a restaurant. Summertime, he would do these festivals where we set up basically a food cart. This is before food carts were a big thing. And we basically would be outside for 18 hours a day slinging Chinese food. I remember at one of the festivals, it was really hard to get into. It was the Scandinavian Festival. So yes, we're selling Chinese food at a Scandinavian festival. That's correct. My dad had for years been trying to get into that festival because it has tons of traffic, tons of people, and it's free to get in. So we just knew we'd be able to crush. And at this point, he had been doing the festival business for about 20 years. So he is really well known in the Eugene area. That's where I grew up. And we finally got in. So we got in, and we were the only Chinese food or Asian food booth at the festival. Now, there were some other Asian business owners, and they had completely different menus for this place. So when they saw us come in, and they were immediately pissed. They're like, oh, why are these guys here? And it got worse. That first year, we did like 3-4x sales everybody else. Like my dad had such a well-dialed machine, we crushed. And that made the other people more mad, those other Asian owners. In fact, they tried to get us kicked out from the festivals. They're like, do all stuff. And what's really interesting was I'm all mad because I'm 17. I'm like, oh, those guys are jerks. I can't believe they're doing it. My dad's like, Marcus, just chill, calm down. It's fine. There's plenty of business for everyone. Like we treat people with respect. The second year, we're placed right next to one of the guys who hated our guts. This guy, Simone. And the festival runs Thursday through Saturday or Sunday. So right before the dinner rush, so there's a dinner rush that's come. It's where you make most of your money anyways, because there's crowds of people. Dinner rush is about 5 to 6 p.m. Right before, Simone, his stove goes out. Simone is freaking out. He's like, because he's basically going to miss the whole dinner rush, right? It's where you really make the money. And my dad stops what he's doing, has me take over everything else. He goes over, says, I spend like 30 minutes helping Simone fix his stove, gets it working so Simone can serve his customers. And he comes back, I'm like, Dad, why would you help that guy? That guy is taking our customers. He's like, no, Marcus. He's like, and he basically said, kind of what goes around comes around. He's like, at the end of the day, there's plenty of customers. We should always help other people. He's like, this is how we should do things. This is the sometimes the right thing to do doesn't feel like the best thing to do. But remember, it's always the right thing to do. And I remember thinking that, I'm like, wow. And And I remember even prior to that, and years after, I would see him with that same behavior over and over and over, helping other people. Like he was telling me this story the other day. Like when he first got into the real estate business and buying properties, he would, like, his first rental property, he intentionally accepted a bad deal with the guy because this guy was willing to teach him about the real estate business. He's like, I'll make my money back a year, like, later on. I don't really care, but I'm willing to take this bad deal. I'm sure I'm a great partner, so I can learn so much from him. And that was this long-term thinking that I thought was really, really powerful. So I've always carried that through, like, my corporate career as I got a little bit older, right? Like, I remember even like my first outside sales role, once I started getting good, I would cold call my competitors, like in person. I would walk into my competitor's office and develop rapport with them and build trust with them, right? Because I needed a place to pass customers I couldn't sell to anyways, right? And I even sold some of them, you know? So fast forward to having my own business, that became very pivotal for me, right? Just to continue that mindset of helping others whenever I can. Now, at the time, I had more time on my hands anyways, right? So you reached out and I saw your background. I'm like, this guy's a legit operator. Like, I love to help him out because I might be maybe a couple steps ahead, maybe one step ahead. If I can help him anyways, great, that'd be awesome. I'll feel good helping him. Who knows what's going to happen, right? And honestly, it's been amazing. We've had an incredible friendship. We've been together multiple times. You know, we refer business back and forth to each other. It's been really cool. That was not my expectation. It just kind of happened, right? Now, the other component is this, I remember how old was I? I was probably 28 or 29. And I read a book. It was called High Performance Habits by Brendon Burchard. And he realized there's 3 things if he died would be most important for him. And he had 3 different words. And that made me realize, I'm like, if I died right now, what would be my 3 words? What do I want people to remember me by? And I took some time to really think about this, and I realized it boiled down to 3 things. Number 1 was influence. So not in like be an influencer, but like whoever I encounter, can I positively influence or help them in some way, shape, or form? Okay. Number 2 is legacy. Can I build a legacy beyond just me? And number 3 is love or care. The people know whatever I do with the highest intention and care. So when you reached out to me, this allowed me to actually tap into all those things, right? To be able to positively help you, to have an influence, have a legacy of you knowing me and passing that on, right? To show that I love and care, right? To the point of what my dad mentioned. So kind of a long-winded answer, but that's how I approach life. And I have found it is made me much happier to have this type of detachment and just focus on stuff that I can't control like that.
And I'm very fortunate. Like I appreciate it. And we've been, like you said, we've been great friends since. You've been to Cabo, we've done the masterminds and, you know, kick business either way. And yeah, it's been a great relationship. But I've always thought about that because most people don't do it. Like, you know, most people come from a scarcity mindset, and I'm going to be really protective. You mentioned, you know, or I've heard you talk about your parents didn't want you to get into sales. I think it was accountant or lawyer, like traditional career paths for more fortune. Are they proud of you in sales now?
Well, it took a long time. So the first probably 10 years, I think I show them my W-2 and my earnings every single year. Just kind of show them, kind of prove it to them, right? Like, you know, but then, you know, what's interesting was, you know, every time I made a move, they're like, you shouldn't make that move, you know, a stable career, etc. Like even when I started the business, they were scared for me because, you know, like I had equated entrepreneurship to pain because, you know, I saw how hard they worked for, you know, a decent life, not wealthy, just decent life. So they were like, you can go start your own business. Like, you know, this is like incredibly hard, right? Like, you know, and so they were actually very skeptical about me starting the business too. You know, like that was like a big thing. And, but now it's been like, you know, almost 7 years and, you know, they've seen what I've been able to do. Like, I think else like, and I mean, they're kind of old school. Like, I don't think it really set in for them until I wrote a book. It's kind of a weird thing, but like once I wrote a book and it was like a Wall Street Journal, I mean, my mom was like, she got the newspaper and all, like, once she's like a physical thing, because they still don't know what I do right now. They had no idea. They're like, you have to start a business? We don't already know. Some people, they had no idea. They're like,
where's the building, Marcus? I don't like, what is it?
Right. They're like, you should have a building and like hundreds of employees. I'm confused, you know, like, is it an online business? Your people are remote? Like they're confused by that, right? Like your people are all over the world. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of how your clients are everywhere. I'm like, yeah, they're not. It's a weird thing they're better now, but at the time, for early on, for several years, they were very confused. They're like, somehow, I don't know what you're doing. I hope it's not illegal, but good job.
From a time standpoint, I would love to, we could talk for hours, and we'll probably have multiple sessions. But tell me, in the final question here, tell me about the business. Like who do you work with? Where can people find you, and all that good stuff?
So we work directly with B2B sales organizations. So most of them it's chief revenue officers, sales VPs, heads of sales. Typically, the revenue org is between about 25 people. So they're not quite a startup. They're in that growth mode. And a lot of times the problems they're running into is like their leaders are stuck in every single deal, inconsistent process, no real playbooks, deals keep stalling forever, right? And we come in and we do a couple of steps. Number one, we first help them diagnose exactly where they're leaking the most amount of revenue. And then we actually help put and install the right systems to fix all of that across the board. Sometimes that's specifically working directly with the reps. Sometimes we're working with the rev ops and their leaders. Sometimes it's a combination of all of the above. But ultimately, the goal is to install a system that's going to be repeatable, that continue to grow for years to come. And if you want to learn more, head to venliconsulting.com, or they can find me on LinkedIn.
And get your book.
And get my book too.
Out.
Head to Amazon. You can get it at Amazon.
Wall Street Journal bestseller, great book, and ton of great content. So make sure you follow Marcus. Really appreciate it as always, brother. Hopping on, and look forward to doing this again. And thanks again, man.